Welcome to the My Rules Are Better podcast. I'm Tom Barbley. A few kind of topics of note that I've kind of been building over the past few weeks. Apologies for not getting podcasts out, but if I'm not in the mood or if I'm just busy with the girls, unfortunately podcasts are very much a kind of tertiary thinking. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the writing. I wanted to talk a little bit about the subscription service that I'm doing now. But I will start off by saying that the lead pile, that whole thing has come to an end. It was just a matter of time before basically everything not fell apart, but just I had to end. It wasn't even a negative thing. Rochi, whose name's Rose Crotch, still has some painted miniatures and he's going to get me a small portion of the lead pile back to me. But I haven't really heard much from him. That's the difficulty. We've kind of lost communication, which is curious when you have some outstanding painted miniatures to be sent back to you and also some of the lead pile. But, you know, it's just my nature of my interaction with him. So I'm not particularly fussed by that. I know at some time in the future he will eventually get back in contact with me and send me the lead pile or the painted minis, and I'm looking forward to that in some regard. It will very much be a kind of point of closure on this whole process, so it really remains open until I actually receive the miniatures, but it is what it is. I'm not particularly fussed by it. I realised that it came to a kind of natural conclusion. Well, it didn't really. It came to an unnatural conclusion with the view that I was still potentially going to get some additional stuff painted by him, but I just thought, enough with this already. I mean, I don't have people I can play miniature war games with currently, and having a lead pile painted, while being a luxury in some regard, is also something that doesn't fit into my immediate life. It's more important, which I've narrated a little bit in Long Funk, or late a little bit more in My Rules Are Better today, to actually get the books out. So we come to this juncture, 3 books, and I wanted to send a shout out specifically to listener Shay, who advice I've actually taken. I'm putting out Field of Chaos, the Elan's writing, in its own separate book. And strangely enough, and I just recorded this in Long Funk as well, my mother actually did the editing on this, which is strange because there are certain things like, for example, the name of the church and the details associated with the church was incredibly important to my mother, so it went in her edit. And there are a bunch of other things which are incredibly important. She eliminated small amounts of the kind of latent misogyny, which was in there mainly from the writing, or not the writing, but the detailing of another party in the story. And she did change the name of the other party in the story, which I had previously had him as the Unknown. However, in the new Field of Chaos writing, he's known as UI, which is a strange name for him, and I didn't really flag that because I just wanted to get my mother's edit out. It's a very particular edit. It takes the writing in a very focused direction, which I thought was incredibly important. But, you know, it's something that I'll probably come back to read, you know, maybe in a year's time, maybe in 6 months' time, when I have a physical copy in my hands. My friend Craig Wilson, who is someone who I've written with previously, I wrote the Crunch book together with him maybe 4, 5, 7 years ago now. I don't know how long ago it was. Is doing the graphic design on it, which is actually really interesting because I've given him the remit that they should look like old Penguin books. And of course, for this particular podcast recording, as it's called My Rules Are Better, the Just Plain Chaos rules with additional augmentation, the writing about being a dungeon master, the writing about, you know, a variety of different things which have been incredibly important and also central to some of the discussion points in this particular podcast will be in the Just Plain Chaos role-playing game release, which I'm looking forward to. It will be available for digital download as well. Part of the company that I'm using for the print on demand has the option of a digital download too, and I've, you know, when I work with Craig on this part specifically, I will certainly say to him, let's get a digital download version available as well. And the graphic design, I'm not going to, you know, say too much about it, aside from the fact that Craig is an amazingly talented artist. I'm waiting for him to do actually some line art, because as it is currently, he's just working on the covers. But within the Eternals, the potential for line art, the potential for some amazing graphics, I'm still looking forward to hopefully getting it out there. But yes, shout outs to Shay, and there will be a version, in fact, for Shay specifically, because he was so instrumental in the kind of discourse and editing. I don't mind sending him some copies. So if you can let me know roughly when this thing comes out, I'll get him additional copies so he can have the new writing as well as the old writing. So point 3 that I wanted to record on, I have joined a subscription service. In fact, I joined 2 subscription services. Part of the end of the lead pile painting is that I have a little bit more money just kind of lying around on a monthly basis. So my thought was to get a subscription service. Well, I saw this on Facebook, actually. It's one of these things where if you catch me late at night on Facebook, you'll get me to buy anything. No, seriously, I've also subscribed to monthly scent service, and I put these two things together. I've always had a slight interest in fragrances. I used to belong to a company called, well, not belong to, but I used to be a subscriber to a company called Waft, which enabled you to create your own fragrances online and then they'd send them to you, which was an amazing kind of .com at the time, but unfortunately they didn't survive the pandemic period. So I have a few last Waft samples, but basically I was looking for something else. It's funny actually, because the analogies that I'm drawing between the used magazine subscription service and the Scentbird is that these are just luxuries, fundamentally. So my ability to smell differently on a monthly basis. Well, I've got 3 fragrances that are sent to me each month, and one of which that was sent to me this month I thought was actually quite good, and bought the fragrance separately. So really, my interest in fragrances is very secondary to my interest in, well, what are they? They're magazines, used magazines. It's basically a used magazine subscription service where you get 2 magazines sent to you per month. I wish I had them in front of me, actually. One of them was a Dragon from 2000, and one of them was an Independent Games magazine from 1995. And it's interesting, of these time frames, these are both reasonable time frames. I flipped through the Dragon magazine, and I flipped through the Independent magazine, actually. The whole nature of what I do in the evening has changed fundamentally, and I've just realized that I forgot to actually record that in the long funk. Do I go back or do I do a secondary? I think I do a secondary. So the nature of my evenings is very much associated with passive consumption, YouTube, these kind of things. I had a magazine subscription on my iPad for a period of time, or not a magazine subscription, but a magazine subscription service, which enabled me to get half a dozen magazines on my iPad, which I stopped. Just, I don't know, it wasn't really doing much for me. I mean, it was interesting reading in the evening, and YouTube goes in ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's a very good group of YouTube clips that I see in the evening, and sometimes I'm just wondering why I'm even there watching YouTube. But my evenings have changed. I used to do a lot more programming in the evenings, and I'm going to certainly record a little bit of long funk on this footnote. But yeah, just my evenings are very different now. And the magazine subscription service, I don't know, reading magazines because they don't have illumination behind them is something in the evening which is slightly more interesting, but I'm willing to do it for at least another couple of months. This month was sufficiently good and sufficiently interesting that I think if I can get a second-hand Dragon magazine or a number of, there are so many independent magazines that I have no particular, window into, and I know through this period of time, which I don't know, I'm not sure if I'll get, Dragon magazines from the 1980s sent to me. Who knows? Who knows what the subscription service will do? But I'm certainly willing to keep it on for another month to see what comes to me. And one final footnote I wanted to make. The letter that I wrote for the community people in the library, the local giveaway library, hasn't really netted any communication. So I'm hoping that person might actually be listening to this podcast. But yeah, so nothing came of that, which I think is just the nature of a lot of the lines in the sand that one puts occasionally. So the hope of having a game, or at least a friend that one could call upon here and talk about these kind of things, or interact, or show my own specific proclivities and collecting habits, unfortunately, just a footnote now, not something that's actually been acted upon. Apologies once again for the frequency of these podcasts, but it's just the nature of having twins. Just the nature of having twins. Tom Barbalet in Las Vegas, Nevada, signing out.